Hi everybody, I'm going to be talking about my research paper on the lottery by Shirley Jackson, and I'm viewing it as a critique of modern political systems. Shirley Jackson wrote this story just 3 years after the Second World War, and so it had a lot of impact as it was published in the New Yorker and generated a ton of responses. And it's kind of interesting because she and her husband both had a strong uh, involvement in the politics at the time. She was a self-proclaimed communist, and he was a Jew, and so all the politics at the time definitely had a large impact in their lives. Um, I looked at this paper as a critique of modern political systems, in particular of capitalism, communism, and anti-Semitic. All three of these had a large impact in Shirley Jackson's life. She lived inside the United States in a capitalist government. She felt that she herself was communist and her husband was Jewish and was greatly or drastically impacted by the Second World War. Um, and I found this really interesting quote from Tessa Hakaraya. I apologize if I slaughtered that, if anybody knows. So she looked at this paper and she said, Shirley Jackson wrote with ambiguity for the purpose that everybody can take this paper and extrapolate it on whatever political system that they want. And so this paper is really unique, or this short story is really unique because we can apply it to all three. And I said that she did that through her use of the symbolism of the lottery, the change in young people's attitudes, the harsh punishment of Mrs. Hutchinson, and the physical state of the box. The symbolism of the lottery could be used to critique all three governments. And so I split that up into three paragraphs here. First off, I'm going to be talking about capitalism. Um, in capitalism, it is common that the rich control the society. They control the economics and the politics. And in The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, Mr. Summers, Mr. Graves, and Mr. Martin are the three people who run the lottery. They are the ones that store the box, the ones who write the paper, make the dot, the mark on the paper that means the person who won the lottery, and they also administer the lottery. And so this is kind of gives them the power over the lottery. They're the ones who control it, they officiate over it, and they are also the three richest men in the village, which coincides exactly with this idea of capitalism and the rich control the society. And this is Shirley Jackson uses this to say that the rich will take advantage and control the masses, the social aspect of society, for their own personal gain. Interestingly enough, you can also use the system of the lottery as a symbol to mock or to critique the communist political system. So, in communism, one of the core ideas is that everybody is the same, fair, equal. Um, there's the problem with this that it doesn't end up being that. There will always be people who take advantage of it and try and gain control and basically abuse the system. And in this Lottery by Shirley Jackson, the lottery is supposed to be fair as well, that everybody has the equal chance of being the person who will be killed or stoned. However, the system of the lottery is actually not fair in The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Richard H. Williams did a statistical analysis of the system of the lottery. So it works in two stages. The first stage is the families draw within themselves for like an elected person to be in the lottery. And then the second stage is from those elected people, someone is chosen. This creates an unfair statistical probability for families that are smaller versus families that are larger. Larger families have less chance of being selected than smaller families. Well, the individual, not the family themselves. So that means that some people have a higher or lesser chance of being selected. And this can be easily extrapolated onto communist governments where some people take advantage of it and they gain power. There will always be people who want to control and to abuse the system, and so that can be used to mock communist governments. The last section that I wanted to talk about as far as the system of the lottery is the fascist governments, or the anti-Semitic, as I mentioned earlier. And this has to do with just when this story was published, was just 3 years after World War II. And the paper was violent, or the story was violent, and it recalled a lot of people to the horrors of the war. And that this, in particular, generated a ton, or a lot, of those responses from the New Yorker. It can be can be analyzed. Michael Robinson said that referred to the lottery in his description of scapegoat theory on World War II. Scapegoat theory is basically that you take all your blame for some sort of error, like Germany with World War I, or some other societal problem, and you push it off onto a group that you've deemed as your scapegoat. So they take all the blame. And this happened with the fascist governments with the Jewish people. And this can be equated to the lottery because the lottery takes an entire village and they, for some reason, kill someone. And it can be easily said that they're throwing all the blame or for some reason that they're doing all this horror to one person in a way to remove scapegoat theory or to remove the blame from themselves, to use Mrs. Hutchinson as a scapegoat. So this can be also linked to the anti-Semitic government through the system of the lottery because it's a small village, and the concentration camps during World War II were also considered small. And someone dies in the system of the lottery every year, in a theory from the scapegoat theory to alleviate the blame and the pain for everybody else. While this also was true in concentration camps, people tried to die for the ones they loved and to prevent others' deaths quite often. Moving on from the system of the lottery, Shirley Jackson also used the changes of younger people and the other towns as attitude towards the lottery to critique modern governments. So in Shirley Jackson's life, she felt a lot of oppression and resentment towards her because she was a self-proclaimed communist and her husband was Jewish, and they lived in a small town of Pennsylvania called North Bennington, where the people were very conservative, and she felt like she was being mistreated and that she was a forethinker, like more advanced than her peers there. And so she mocked the communist government through this, that were clinging to old traditions in the United States. They can also be used to mock the collapse of communist and fascist governments. These governments work on an ideal, and as soon as that ideal is kind of no longer supported by the younger generations, they collapse. The harsh punishment of Mrs. Jackson can also be used to critique critique these governments where someone dies. That they use governments that use fear and scare tactics to maintain control, and this can be, depending on your perspective, portrayed on any of the three governments. Also, the system of the lottery, the box, it had been slowly deteriorated over time. It wasn't even the same box, and so that can be used to show that governments fall apart and decay over time, and that can be easily extrapolated on communist, capitalist, or anti-Semitic. So yeah, that was my paper on the lottery by Shirley Jackson, and I hope you enjoyed it.